Discussing stereotypes in a low socio-economic status setting by revealing societal issues impacting children's learning. Key strategies in managing these issues include communication, interaction, and pedagogy of success. In an upper primary school, disruptive boys coming from mid to low socio-economic or working class backgrounds with anti-academic attitudes are struggling with reading and literacy and scoring low in state tests. Some of the strategies implemented are working in groups and using popular culture references. However, most dislike reading and are disinterested and disengaged. This manifests into bullying and sexist comments and overall rough conduct. The issues primarily focused on will be low SES attitudes, gender stereotypes, and classroom engagement strategies. These issues are highlighted further in research, revealing that low income results in substandard education. These societal influences dictate the cyclicality nature of poverty and low standard education. Further, the boys have brought disruptive and sexist ideals into the classroom from their communities. Pre-existing strategies have failed, and standardized testing in this case only exacerbates problems already associated with a lack of communication with stakeholders. That is not to say governments, parents, and businesses have no say in this Ouroboros context, yet it is achievable to seek out the best results possible despite relegating circumstances. Students are using stereotypes to self-justify the actions of girls and women. That is, the boys feel the need to provoke the girls who are acting in ways which counter the boys' understandings. It would be good practice, according to Gorski and Strauss 2013, to invite exploration of definitions asking how the boys define poverty or gender norms. Teachers must not subjugate these students further themselves. It is common with little evidence to group these boys by the few negative actions they make, which further limits appropriate communication and change. It is very likely that the conduct of the disruptive boys is being reinforced by wealthier parents who pass judgments on the poorer families. That these boys are simply reenacting the comments they hear from home. Strauss, 2013. Communication is paramount more than ever between curriculum stakeholders, all parties involved with education. Teachers must first learn about students' backgrounds, even if admitting this leaves educators in a state of uncertainty to bring about change. Consequently, it is a failure of education if these issues are not addressed, states the National Union of Teachers. McNaughton argues these issues stem from a highly constructed marketplace, an interactive community of families and friends where children socialize and consecutively meet. This is where children construct their identities of working class, and in this case masculinity, where power plays are instilled. In comparison to the scenario, it was noted by Carrington, Times, and Merrill that a male or female role model has little to no impact on students' learning. The children, before ever entering the classroom, have dispositions and understandings of who they are. If what they learn at school does not adhere to these ideals, a student becomes disengaged. Students are always seeking relationships first, implies Marguzzi, 1993. It is then up to the teachers to not only engage students, but to know their students. What you should know from the evidence of Thompson, Margison, and the National Union of Teachers is that an initial assessment and reflection can be made of who your students are and what influences them. Furthermore, to combat these submissive influences, strategies from Gorski, Suraj Blatchford, and Mayer give educators insightful solutions to these issues. Pop culture was used also to evoke interest, yet Lin argues that free thought becomes constricted without co-construction, needing more engaging instruction and interaction. Suraj Blatchford. Marsh and Hedges are adamant, however, about pop culture references levering ability, using cultural references to excite students and aiding curriculum construction. Likened to an umbrella, cultural capital gives students useful tools to move more freely in society. Culture capital is made up of all the influences, material, results, conclusions, and interactions the students experience. It is always prevalent, yet not as rich and strong in certain situations. To have enough of free flow up the social ladder, students need to become that which they are not, an arduous task. Success of social mobility and of the learning is building of culture capital, equipping students with curriculum aids which facilitate this learning. Gorski claims arts bolsters learning engagement and retention for all students and especially for low-income youth. That experience can overcome circumstance. The Australian curriculum guideline, remaining ubiquitous throughout every learning experience, is found in each learning outcome. Similar to the Australian curriculum is the Early Years Learning Framework and its planning cycle, which implores us to explore and assess each situation and to know each student. Earlier, the students brought in texts from home. This is a welcoming strategy, as many students may not have access to the more homogeneous material other students take for granted. Lin, however, reveals an error in assumption that culture references will limit creativity. The material in this situation inevitably reinforces gender types and low academic language quality. It is also much the same of what the students read at home, evident as they are disinterested. If teachers fail to build on material, the students are simply consumers. Marsh, in contrast, invites us to use pop culture to enact different situations within the classroom, which challenge stereotypes and engage students in real-life circumstances. As an example of role play is to discuss female roles in the magazine or reenact classifieds to appeal to clients of varying backgrounds. Marsh found students would write their own stories and interpretations of events using multiple discourses. When using the Australian Curriculum and Early Years Learning Framework for learning guidelines, take note of language and underlining subtext. Words such as question, reflect, identify, influence, discuss, and context. These are the overall objectives: to seek out issues and identify solutions. Most students will know the answers, yet only have an issue with the subdisciplinary language use. Without appropriate engagement and inquiry, the students are left uninterested, frustrated by a lack of recognition. Students require not just evaluation of their work, but consideration of their journey. It is critical that students have varying ways to communicate knowledge and understandings of key concepts learned or observed, and that exploration is promoted. Foremost, when communicating belief, build hope in the classroom and inculcate a pedagogy of success by rejecting a deficit view. Teachers also will work better with an atmosphere of achievement, nourishing success. To target specific situations, teachers need to be researchers, communicating with parents and students, a negotiated curriculum. To avoid diffidence in students, avoid negative situation, asking positive stories and using positive examples. With a multiplicity of sources, problem construction becomes enjoyable, what Clark refers to as a mosaic approach. Further, enjoyment of the problem is necessary in an engaging curriculum. The Australian curriculum and Mayer are intertextual in stating appropriate choice of strategies and building of the problem. Lastly, use real-life situations to construct meaning. This challenges stereotypes by instruction through interaction, leaving students to make their own provoking conclusions. Putting ideas into practice in the classroom. Boys should have access to alternative forms of masculinity, positive and constructive. Look for role models in interests and activities. Involve students with other communities to further their identity construction. Include viewing dramatic performances and be sure to use a range of non-stereotypical characters. Challenge the ideas and beliefs presented in material the students are reading. When challenging gender roles, women tend to bring out the best results in both sexes. In groups, tell positive stories and invite students to use their own stories which counter stereotypes. Pair students with contrasting academic levels or in groups. And try implementing the use of images, video, and stories when teaching literacy. Build your problems out of interaction. Try games and sports. Include various forms of activities. Clearly communicate standards and expectations to parents. Communicate the belief you have. Pre-read the situation. Understand the context, environment, and influence. Pre-assess your students. Research and reflect. Work from the needs of the students and build it up. Ask for parental involvement in real-life literacy strategies. Writing, typing letters, reading newspaper magazines, conversations explaining new word definitions, script writing, business plans, game plans, future goals, learning music, learning language, and finally, encourage student research. Have clearly defined objectives, resources, timeframes, and assessments. A literacy lesson plan. Step 1 can be a week-by-week strategy. Have the students read a material of choice. The Australian curriculum states literature overview, understanding, appreciating, responding to, analysing, and creating literature. Step 2 can be a monthly. Have the students rewrite their own material of choice in an ideal situation. Encourage the use of images, new subdisciplinary words, paintings, drawing, or even internet links. Step 3 can be quarterly. Invite the students to discuss or act out material, explaining concepts and ideas in material. Try to encourage deeper thought of topics and writings, word definitions, and interpretation of real-life circumstances. The Australian curriculum states understand, interpret, discuss, and evaluate to evoke further interest from students, stretching original ideas and concepts. And step 4 can be a yearly assessment. Mixed class groups, placing high performing students with lower, active students with sedentary, or artistic with more academic. Encourage repetition and explanation attempts. Make sure you keep group discussions short and concise. Avoid negative examples and be involved with the groups. The end result can be a combination of writings, presentations. This could be an assignment or an interaction such as a play. Here are some helpful links. Final thoughts and provocations. Understand what influences and impacts a child's learning, what each student brings from home. Educators use curriculum aids and personal philosophy to refute or enforce positive and negative behaviours passed on by stakeholders. Engage, not dictate. A fallacy of teaching is that a world of knowledge can simply be passed on to students. Educators inculcate inquiry and questioning. Foster relationships with parents and students. Know your students. And understand your influence, philosophy, and belief. No curriculum in its own right can really excite students. Only teachers can.